Welcome to the Buzz Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Mosquito.
And I'm Maureen Nylene.
The Buzz Podcast is where business, technology, and innovation collide. It's where we deep dive into candid conversations with leaders who are pushing the boundaries in healthcare, technology, and beyond.
It's also where you're going to hear industry experts who are rewriting the rules, and in some cases, they're breaking them. So don't forget to join us for each new episode and like and subscribe to the Buzz Podcast.
Hey, Health Buzzers. Welcome to the first electrifying episode of the Buzz Podcast. We're here to peel back the layers of healthcare, cybersecurity with a dash of intrigue and a sprinkle of wisdom. I'm your host, Mike Mosquito. Joining me in the studio is our intrepid co-host, Maureen Nylene. She's a wonderful nerd and thought leader. I'm so glad to have her with me. Maureen?
Thank you, Mike. I am so excited to be co-hosting with you. And I think that we can both agree we're buzzing with excitement because today we have Dr. Christopher Fries here with us in the studio. He's gracing our presence. We are going to learn so much from him. So excited about the conversation we are about to have. Dr. Fries, before we move on, your background is so unique. Please let our audience know just a little bit more about yourself.
Well, thank you, Mike and Maureen. It's exciting to be here. I know you're getting started in this podcast. It's a pleasure for me to be one of your first guests. I do have an interesting background. I started off primarily as a CPA, as an accountant, working for the state of Tennessee. And man, I realized soon I was not a good accountant. I needed to do something different. And eventually I found my way into investigations and got hired by the FBI. So I spent a lot of time with the FBI. Then I retired not too long ago. Worked a short stint for the Department of Human Services in Mississippi and decided I want to go back to school and get a PhD, which I did. And so now I've gotten hired by the University of Oklahoma here in Tulsa, and I do cybersecurity.
Well, that's great. That's great. We're really excited to have you on as our first guest. It's been a long time coming for us, so it's great to have a leader in law enforcement and a leader in academia joining us today. But we're going to jump right into this. But first, with that name, Dr. Fries, and I'm Mike Mosquito. I've been called a superhero before. I got to ask you, if you were a superhero, you had one power, what would you freeze?
Ooh, wow. That's a pretty fabulous question. What would I freeze? I guess in the cybersecurity world, it'd probably have to be ransomware. I know it's the big topic today and it seems to be an easy answer, but, for me, when I look at it, a lot of the things that we've seen in the past with cybersecurity, they're all issues. They all have an effect on people, but I mean, ransomware. I mean, somebody's hacking into a system like a hospital, healthcare, first responders, pipelines, you name it. Things that we need every day. And they're basically saying you're not going to get your information until you pay us millions, tens of millions of dollars. And where I really think there's an issue is because now you're talking about the health and safety of somebody right now, like in a hospital, right? If I don't have access to that person's medical records, if I don't have access to the drugs and the medications they need, I mean, we're talking about literally life and death situations, and the hackers have decided to capitalize on that. And so now they're actually creating this ransomware and putting people in very, very precarious situations. And it's such a bad thing that I think we need to really address it. And I'd be happy if I could just freeze that one thing. I think we'd go a long way in certainly today's environment.
You never know what technology might be able to bring in the future. So if there's a way for you to do that, that would be amazing. And I would certainly support that effort. I want to go back, though, because you really do have such a unique background. And I just want to highlight that a little bit more. State auditor, FBI agent, Department of Human Services. Then you moved from all of that. You transitioned your skills from all of those areas. Now you're teaching cybersecurity for future generations. You really have a remarkable career of catching people being deceptive and fraudulent. So I tend to think your students are probably a little bit afraid of you. I would be. I definitely would not take it as an opportunity to cheat in his class. But curious, out of your storied career, was there a moment in time that really shaped you, whether it was cybersecurity or if it was just another moment where you looked at technology and said, wow, I need to vary my approach, or I need to think about it in a slightly different way?
Well, when you say it like that, sometimes I look at it and go, man, I'm not sure I can keep a job. It seems like I just change careers all the time. Uh, I'm excited about the background, right? I look now at my experiences and see how they tied together and really helped me in my career and build upon it. But for me, it's interesting. It wasn't too long ago, maybe probably just a year or so. I'm sitting in an auditorium where they're discussing the creation of this new college that I'm at the University of Oklahoma, and they're talking about cybersecurity. And I'm listening to the experts talk about some of the issues that they're facing, some of the threats they're facing. And I listen and I go, it's been nearly 30 years and nothing's changed. I mean, we're still talking about social engineering. We're still talking about phishing and malware. We're still talking about things that when I was a brand new agent in the mid 90s for the FBI, those were the cases that were given to me, right? And so I'm investigating those cases and I look now and it's like, has nothing really ever changed? Yeah, we got AI and okay, maybe ransomware, but those things don't happen, aren't useful unless they're still calling upon social media, still using the malware and the phishing techniques to make those other exploits work. And it really sort of grabbed hold of my attention, and I got to thinking that well, maybe we ought to be putting more emphasis on the human side, the behavioral side of cybersecurity, and not so much on the tech. Yes, we need tech. Yes, we got to stay at advancements. I get that, but are we really paying attention to how human behaviors both drive the cyber threats and allow us to effectively respond to the cyber threats? So I really look more at this idea of humans as part of the solution instead of thinking about humans really as just the problem.
It's very good. That's good.
Yeah.
I love it. And I think that as we move towards that, we've got humans in play. I like your approach of we got to target the humans here. So I'm gonna kick the can over here for a second, Dr. Freeze. Let's take it in this direction. In regards to annual compliance with humans, that testing that every organization goes through, is it actually useful anymore? Or are we just asking folks to click some buttons, get a 70 or 80% so an organization can check a box? Tell me your thoughts about that.
All right, let me give you the academic answer to that type of question, right? The academic answer is yes and no. It depends.
That's an FBI agent for sure.
Yeah. Let me explain that. All right. So yes, I believe we need those trainings. We need those compliance measures. You've got to be able to test whether or not your employees are actually listening to, responding to, incorporating into their work cybersecurity principles. And to be able to do that for a large company, particularly when you got thousands and thousands of employees, yes, online training, online responses are good. But here's where the no comes in, right? So you get to 70%, you get to 80%. It's like, got it, passed the test. Some compliance auditors looking at, oh, yeah, we met our benchmark, we're good to go. And I'm asking, well, what about that other 20 or 30% that they failed?
Right.
Right? What are you doing? That's where you ought to be looking. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody got the book answer, they got the 70%, but if they are missing certain questions, if they're not able to respond in a way that gets the correct answer, it's either a couple of things. One, you're not asking the question in a way that makes sense, or two, they haven't learned the concept. And so you can keep rolling out the same old, tried and true cybersecurity online training, or you can go, all right, that's good, but what we really need is a block of instruction here. What we really need is to follow up on why 20% or 30% of our employees are missing this type of question. Mm-hmm. And again, it goes back to our human behavior. We look at it and go, check the box, moving on, when in reality, we ought to be going, I need to be digging a whole lot deeper into the answers here. What's behind the scenes that I need to get at?
And that makes sense because you're
not a once a year activity too, because we do that compliance training annually. We get it in our learning environment. We have to go in, we sign into it, we dread it, and we let our teams know, oh gosh, we've got to go through this compliance training. Well, how fast can we get through that? And it's not a meaningful activity. But I am struck by your comment that we're still talking about some of the same things that have happened over the last 30 years. And that leads me right into phishing. I can't imagine a more persistent threat that we are still looking at. It makes no sense to me. It's a balance of frustration, but also a little bit of curiosity in that how are they continuing to be successful? And I was thinking about our conversation that we were going to be having, and I thought, well, how do I approach these phishing activities? And I think, gosh, I look for misspellings or grammatical errors, and that usually is a good clue that don't click on that. But my husband got one the other day in his work account, and it was from an airline, and it said, hey, just want to let you know there's been a change to your itinerary. And we're traveling in a few weeks, so it makes sense, right? You start to make those dots connect. And he almost clicked on it. And the only thing that stopped him from clicking on it was he remembered that's not the flight that we booked. It was a different airline. And so the level of sophistication can really be quite remarkable. So I'm wondering, are we ever actually going to get rid of phishing, or is this just going to be around forever? I'm just wondering strategies. If you've got a brilliant idea, this is the time we want to hear
it. Brilliant ideas. If I did, I'd probably incorporate it and sell it, and make a lot of money. Here's my thought on phishing. And I know there's some disagreement around this. I read an article just today that talked about a little bit different perspective than I take. And I appreciate what this author had to say. But I look at phishing as not a root cause to the problem. I look at phishing as a method to cybersecurity threats. I think the root causes, primarily, by and large, almost all of them, are social engineering problems. That's the root cause. And the root cause of social engineering is this human behavior.
Okay.
So how does the phishing even work? Right? Because they know just enough, or they play the odds just well enough that they know, hey, you're interested in flying. You're interested in this particular idea. You're interested in healthcare. You're interested in whatever. Maybe they've been proactive and they looked at your social media accounts and you've posted all these things that you like, right? And so they start crafting it because they're interested in human behavior enough to say, oh, well, Maureen likes this and Mike likes that. And so, we'll keep trying it. And they can use AI, where you have the spelling errors and other issues. They can use AI to make that phishing attempt email even better than it has in the past. And then they just send it out. And then we're clicking on it because human behavior is, oh, there's a problem I need to address. Oh, I want some money. Oh, there's a job. Oh, I didn't, we're curious, right? And so they just need to play the percentages, right? And they're going to get enough people to click on it in order to make it worthwhile. But really, this social engineering, that's what I think is those cancerous, often misunderstood type of problem. I was thinking earlier today, I was sharing some of these ideas, and they said, well, what about, phishing and malware? And I said, look, do you remember the movie Leonardo DiCaprio was in, To Catch a Thief? He played, I think that's the title of it. He played Frank Abagnale, and it was all about manipulating checks and all about his ability to be a pilot and a doctor and all these things, right? And he had nothing to do with phishing, had nothing to do with electronics. It had all about his understanding of human behavior and his ability to manipulate your behavior. Mm-hmm. That's social engineering. That is what we're dealing with. And until we're willing to take on the idea of how do we better understand human behavior, what are we doing to block it, and how do we get humans involved in that instead of thinking everything's a tech solution, I think we're going to keep being victims of phishing because it works. I mean, it works. If it didn't work, they wouldn't be doing it. And
Right.
so until we kind of shift that paradigm, I think we're sort of stuck in that reality.
Mm.
I agree with you. As we talk about human behaviors and we get into addictions and other things that people will do over and over and over again, we get into that with our corporate and our work life. We do things a certain way. We come into the office, we do these certain tasks, we don't break them. We're addicted to the ding on the email, so we click it, right? We hear it, we click it. We're addicted to the ding. We just don't realize it. And so, as we talk about the human engineering side of cybersecurity and those behaviors, I want you to share with us and our buzz listeners out there a cybersecurity incident where human behavior played an unexpected role. So, how did it trigger a response? And how did that experience shape your perspective on cybersecurity as an FBI agent?
Yeah, I was a young agent in the FBI, youngish, at least around 2000, 2001, when we were made aware because the investigation was going on and a person had been arrested about an agent named Philip Hansen, uh, Robert Philip Hansen. And he'd been a long-term counterintelligence agent. And for over 15 years, he had stolen top secret classified information from the FBI and used his knowledge to circumvent policies, procedures, to lie his way out of being getting caught. He knew how we worked, and when it it's bad enough when it's somebody else. When it's one of your own, it just kind of hits at the quick of your heart. And it's like all of a sudden it's like, this is terrible. And it's not just, okay, it was a bad action. He took that information, he sold it to the Russians. The Russians used it to eliminate at least a dozen assets that the United States government had, right? Compromising national security. People died because of the action he took. And so here I am, 20 years later, talking about Mr. Hansen and realizing that I would argue that the biggest threat that we have is that insider threat, right? It's the insider.
Yeah.
It's it just drives me nuts, right? Because those are the people that we seem to automatically trust, and we want to trust them. We want to trust them. We want to build those relationships. I want to like you. I want you to like me. I want us to get along. I want us to be prosperous. I want us to meet our goals, right? And then we're shocked. We're just shocked whenever something like this happens. You see it on the news all the time. Somebody lived next door to somebody and it's like, well, my neighbor, he was always kind to me. I had no idea. And the next neighbor goes, oh no, I knew he was bad. I could see it, right? Well, why didn't you say anything? Well, that's again, human behavior. We didn't talk about it. And so, this event, here I am, it's over 20 years ago that it happened. And it still resonates with me. And it still, I think, resonates with others when you realize that yes, we got the problem, social engineering, we got weaknesses, but when you're talking about the biggest threat to your organization, even within cybersecurity, unintentionally or intentionally, it is that insider threat. And you've got to be willing to take a detached, objective viewpoint when you're trying to dial in and address that problem. If you don't, then all the technical, whiz bang stuff you put into place is going to be useless because, again, they know how to get around it.
So a little off topic, but along the same lines then, Dr. Freeze, how often do you think companies are looking at those inside threats?
Well, I see now a lot more training around it. I mean, you can get some good training on insider threat. I see advertisements for it. I don't see as many job postings unless you're with the federal government or a contractor who contracts with the federal government. Then I see some bleed over into those industries, into those corporations. But I think on average, it's probably a very unexplored area that we could be doing more work in. But because it takes time and money, you're setting up not just again a computer security technical approach answer to the problem. You're probably setting up one or more individuals whose job is it to look at your company employees with a different lens. And sometimes that can, we don't always like that idea. And that's extra money and times. And so we're hoping that the technology will catch it. But if you don't have the person trained to review it and explore it and dig down into it and be able to address it, you're missing opportunities.
Well, and I love this. I think you keep connecting it back to how critical the human being is in any of the conversations that we're talking about. It doesn't matter if it's a criminal investigation for a white collar crime, or if you're talking about it being a cybersecurity incident, you still have that common element of the human being. And like Mike said, we are creatures of habit. I go to bed around the same time. I get up at the same time. I have my coffee around the same time. And I'm not likely to break any of those habits because they benefit me. And people can use that to their advantage to do something that isn't necessarily to my benefit. So talk to me a little bit about, what do you look for, the parallels of behavior that help you to better understand how someone is going to make that next target?
Yeah, Maureen, there is a big difference. No, there's a big similarity between the idea of criminal behavior and cybersecurity behavior, right? Because it is all criminal behavior, right? Let's not forget that. Cybersecurity, sometimes we can write that off because we think that's technology. We think that's something over here. We don't often see the person because they're not with us. And so I don't think we pay enough attention to the idea that this is criminal behavior. But here's what I'm saying you all look for, and here's something that I think you have to understand. When we look at the TV and the films and the books, and somebody says, well, what does it take to commit a crime? Somebody will always say, you got to have what? Means, you got to have the motive, and they got to have the opportunity, right? And that's kind of, we feel like that's a triad. Means, motive, and opportunity. Okay, well, that's fine, but that's not the whole answer. And I'll tell you why. Because, and I don't know enough about what you do, Mike and Maureen, but you might have the means to some money. Maybe because you're in the chain of approval at your organization. Maybe you have an expense account. You might have a motive. Maybe there's something that's going on in your life and you need that money. Okay, that's a motive. And maybe you have opportunity because you're well placed to get it done. Are you going to commit the crime? No. Because most people don't commit crimes, even if they have mean, motive, and opportunity. They start to commit the crimes when they're able to rationalize the means, motive, and opportunity, right? When all of a sudden I can somehow dehumanize an individual, I can somehow mitigate or minimize what I'm actually involved in, and it's not make it seem as bad as it really is, and I can start rationalizing, well, they owe it to me. Right? I've worked so hard. They don't pay me enough. Right. I haven't got the promotions I'm due. All these rationalizations. I've got a sick mother, father, child. I just need to borrow the money. Now you're rationalizing it. Now you're committing crimes. And so cybersecurity, same thing. Somebody is saying, because we all have, maybe not all, but we have, the cybersecurity hackers have the means, motive, and opportunities, but somehow they've rationalized this idea that money is mine. And I'm going to take it. Maybe I'm ticked off at the organization, because the way they treated me. Maybe I just don't like healthcare. Maybe I don't like something else. I'm going to take it because they've rationalized it. And I really do believe that's a point of discussion here that we need individuals to really grasp and not just kind of write it off as another, idea that we get from TV that somehow that's the answer. There's more to that answer, and there's more to cybersecurity.
I agree with Dr. Freeze. I think that illicit behavior and rationalization coming together just fosters this environment that we're living right now, and it's proliferated through all industries, so no one's excused from it. And I think we'll continue to see until we change our behaviors, our human behaviors, and our habits and patterns as humans. I think we'll continue to see this type of technology and our technology infrastructure being exploited in these ways. But how does collaboration, let's get on to bringing folks together and addressing cybersecurity. How does collaboration play a role in cyber challenges, and how can we foster a greater collaboration between cybersecurity experts, healthcare professionals, policymakers, and the patient advocates that are out there? Because we're in healthcare. When, as you said in the beginning, when systems are held for ransom and they go down, we've got patient lives at stake where they can't get the medicines that they need or the care that they need, and they're in a bed right now. So how do we educate these these bodies of influence over healthcare and over patients? How do we get them together and promote that diversity?
Well, Mike, now you're asking the hard questions.
That's what this podcast is all about.
Now you're asking questions that are uncomfortable, right? Collaboration. Let me just start with this idea. And my point of view is that I don't believe we understand the word collaboration. We think we know what it means. We say if we get people in the room that somehow we're collaborating. We say if I get this company and that company together, somehow we're collaborating. But in reality, I think most of the time, we're not collaborating. What we're doing is minimizing the number of people and the number of voices and the number of ideas from outside so that it doesn't create more problems for us. Now, here's what I mean, right? So we've got this idea, and I know people have different viewpoints on diversity, equity, inclusion, and that's for another time, right? But I would argue that if you do not have diversity and inclusion on your team, your cybersecurity team, you will not be successful, or at least as successful, right? You need people with different backgrounds. You need them to be able to come into the room because they have different cultures, races, ethnicities, genders, college experiences, work experiences. You need those people in the room to help you understand the threat. The military does this pretty well. They pull together lots of different people on their cybersecurity teams and other teams from different disciplines, and they say, look, we know that we need all these different viewpoints and ideas and perspectives in order to effectively mitigate the threat. In industry, what I've seen, and maybe there's other experiences that other people can share, but what I've seen is we like to have unity or collaboration through exclusion, and we're going to put everybody who looks alike or who all went to cybersecurity and got a degree in cybersecurity, we're going to put them on the team. Okay, I get it. You're hiring cybersecurity professionals, but you've eliminated the perspective of what about the person who, has a criminology degree, a psychology degree, an engineering degree, a healthcare degree. Why not put them on your cybersecurity team so that we can better understand how the cybersecurity threats affect all those different disciplines within your organization? And so really, when we talk about collaboration, again, it's this idea of, I think you just don't understand, Mike. You just don't understand my problems. You just don't understand where I'm coming from and the issues. If you only understood, I need people who understand like I do and think like I do. Well, okay, that's going to be a problem for you. I'm telling you right now. We need, and sometimes it's an uncomfortable voice, but we need those voices in the room, sharing those ideas, and then being able to work through a collaborative process to get better answers to what the problems are.
And I love how you highlight that it can't just come from the technology space. Use the voices that don't have any integration within technology at all and maximize their voice, because you're underrepresenting how important their role is and their voice. So yeah, kudos to you. I love that response. You had a fantastic post. I definitely would encourage people to go out and check some of the posts that you've got out there. Really, really amazing. But okay, I want to have some fun, Mike.
All right, let's do it. Let's do it.
I want to ask a spicy question, something that I wouldn't normally ask, because we all have jobs where we don't necessarily feel like we're okay to share what we're thinking. Maybe it's politics. Maybe we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. And so we've got this big elephant in the room and we're not talking about it. And I don't know about your experiences, but it never ends well for me. We usually end up having some fallout associated with it. But I want to know, what do we actually need to be talking about that we're not talking about? Because I want to talk about that today. So from your perspective, what's your elephant in the room? What do you see?
Yeah, if I think for me, my elephant in the room, I like the way you put that. I hadn't thought about that before, the elephant in the room. But really, I think it's around this idea that I don't think most companies really care about cybersecurity. I think we pay lip service to it. Mm-hmm. And I think we'll hire people to fill roles. And I think we'll invest some money. But we're not going to invest that money or take that way to go forward. If it's going to get in the way of my bottom line, the money we're going to make, if it's going to affect somehow my ability to make a sale to a customer, if it's going to affect my ability to make that commission or to make that profit or to, increase dividends or, share price or whatever, you can have your cybersecurity as long as it doesn't get in the way of business. And I look at that and I point to that and I say, well, they say, well, how do you know that? I say, look how much money you're spending on cybersecurity. You're built in the healthcare, and you guys will know this way better than I would. In the healthcare, you're talking about companies worth hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars.
Right.
And then you look at their bottom line and say, all right, how much are you actually spending on cybersecurity technique and personnel? Right? Unless the federal government's mandated you, like I know some of my friends who are military contractors, where they mandate this, unless the federal government's mandating you to do it, it's like, it's not worth the price to them. Right. And I can say that because you take even like the Change Health and some other organizations that got hit up for ransomware, allegedly 20 million, 30, it doesn't matter, 20 million, 30 million, 40 million. Okay. How much is that to their bottom line? How much is to the bottom line? Even if they spent that much more in trying to get systems back in line or online, it's still, how much more is that, to their bottom line? What's the ratio? It's very, very small. All right, I get it. You can't put all your money in cybersecurity programs. Got it. But I think it's one of those cost centers that if we're not paying better attention to, we're going to find out that we're losing the trust of our customers and our clients. And they're going to say it's not worth doing business because they can't keep my information secure. And they're not showing that they're really invested in it. And so I would argue, and again, I'm broad brushing it, I got it. But I really think at the end of the day, that's an area we need to spend more time in, is because how much money am I spending on something that is really important? There's a question I used to ask the people that work for me in the FBI. It was kind of a strategy question. And I'd say, how are we doing on what we said was important, right? Not just metrics, but how are we really doing in this area? And if we hadn't made inroads and maybe it was decreasing some crime or decreasing some other points, then it told me we need to pay more attention to it and invest more resources in it. And I just think that that's something we really should be paying more attention to. So that's my elephant in the room, because and we even have started here at OU, we've got in line this idea of a master's of in cybersecurity leadership, right? Different than just a cybersecurity. The focus is on how do you as an executive better understand cybersecurity so that you can make more important and more informed decisions. Because if you're not interested in it and you're not willing to make those decisions, how can you actually effectively lead your company, particularly when it's such a big issue? So that's again, I go back, you hit on it, Maureen, earlier. I keep hitting this human behavior thing because to me, it's fundamental to everything we're doing. And so to me, that's what's important.
Great answer.
That is a great answer. And I love that. I love that. Again, I'm gonna touch on this because I think that you said this before, the human element is a weak link. It is one of the weakest links that we have around the technology that we have in play today. And you're an advocate of what's called a hope-centered approach in cybersecurity. And I played baseball, and in baseball, I was hoping I'd get a bat every time I step up to the plate. And it's not quite that easy when there's 95 plus mile an hour fastballs whizzing past your head all the time. But how do you envision this transforming healthcare organizations and cybersecurity culture and the outcomes that we expect when we walk into a facility? We go there for care. We go there to know that we're going to be protected and cared for, and not walk out with our information spread across how many other continents for sale on the black market, on the cyber security black sites. So how do we empower employees through this hope-centered leadership that you're now carrying this flag for at OU? You've seen this history of time over cybersecurity transform the industry. How do you see the cybersecurity industry coming together on this hope-centered approach?
Well, thanks, Mike. I've been passionate about cybersecurity. I'm even way more passionate about hope-centered leadership, right? So if I get carried away, you just stop me, right? I'm okay with that. So look, if I'm sure you and all your listeners have heard something around this idea that hope is not a strategy. You ever heard that phrase? Hope is not a strategy, right? Well, with all due respect to whoever said that, some people say Dwight Eisenhower, some people others. It doesn't matter who said it. It's been propagated over and over. With all due respect, they're completely wrong. Hope is one of the best strategies we have because hope is based on science. You and I use hope like, I hope you're doing well, right? Okay, I hope you're doing well too, right? I hope I win the lottery. I hope I hit the baseball. You just said, I hope I hit the baseball, right? You know, but when you talk about ideas of lottery winning and, hope something bad doesn't happen and all these things, you're really wishing, right? And so you're right. Wishing is a terrible strategy. I wish that cybersecurity would just take care of itself. Yeah, it's not going to happen. I wish these things would just go away. Not going to happen. Hope, on the other hand, is based on science. And hope says we need three things. We need goals, we need pathways to those goals, and we need the agency or motivation to make those goals happen. And so your strategy, when you have a good cybersecurity strategy, it's based on good goals. One of those goals better be what is the well-being of my employees, right? Because we're all about the performance, we're all about meeting our metrics and that sort of thing, but we're talking about stress, we're talking about burnout, job turnover, job dissatisfaction, right? All the things that cause us to want to leave, that causes the headaches in the office. And you're going, man, it costs me so much, 10, 15, 20% of turnover in the cost, right? Okay, well, that's well-being. It turns out that hope is one of the best indicators of well-being. So if I can increase somebody's well-being, that means I'm increasing their hope. And when I increase their hope, that means I'm increasing their performance, their satisfaction, lowering their stress. Our leaders need to understand how to activate and nurture hope within our employees. Right? I can be the dictator, I can be the authoritarian, I can be the stick guy who comes in and says, this is how things are going to be. And you know what? That'll last for a little while, and then it's not going to last. Right? You probably had coaches that way who, I don't know, yelled and screamed and told you all these things, and you performed for a while, but then you went home and go, I don't like that coach, right? Because that coach really wasn't concerned about your well-being. You need somebody who says, I want to activate and nurture that hope. And that's what Hope Center Leadership is all about. I created a measure, a psychometric measure that can actually measure how employees see and view their leader when it comes to hope. And then I can actually take those items and say, you know what, Mike, out of the 9 items I have, you're kind of low in these 2 or 3 or 4. Let's focus on those. And so maybe Maureen's high in these and she's low in different ones because it may be different for each individual. But here are the things that if you want to work on, if you want to actually make a difference in your employee's life, let's look at these areas. And so you think about a crisis, right? Ransomware. Oh my goodness. What do we do now? Now we're in the midst of a crisis. What's your go-to response? Is it to beat people around the head? Because I got to have an answer? No, you still need to be executing hope. You need to have built that trust with your employees. You still need to be able to get the response that you're looking for. And the way you get that is by identifying and clearly setting the goals, clearly identifying the pathways or the routes to those goals, understanding the challenges we've got to take to meet our goals, and then motivating people to accomplish it. And you'll go, duh, that sounds like good leadership. That's because it is good leadership.
Right.
It's good leadership regardless of the situation in the house at the moment.
That's right.
But there's not enough of it. And so I advocate for and argue for passionately, probably more than I should. We should be Hope Center leaders. And it's not to mean that transformational and authentic and all these things aren't important. It's just like if you want to make sure that well-being is at the center of your employees and your clients or your customers, right? I can activate and nurture it. I can make a difference. Hope Center Leadership is how we do that. And I think it's very applicable to cybersecurity and the challenges that we're facing today, because that's real life and that's what we deal with. It's real life.
I love that you put a measurement behind that. And I love the way you articulate that leadership strategy and how it should be deployed. And as we move towards this future in cybersecurity, and we don't know what these footsteps to the future look like, what disruptive changes do you foresee in cybersecurity, that landscape that's in front of us, and how can we prepare them for it? How do we prepare our future employees, the students that are out there, our clinicians, our doctors, our nurses, our executives? What
Mm-hmm.
radical shifts in cyber warfare strategies should institutions, our CIOs, our CISOs, our chief AI officers, our chief data officers, how can we shift that cyber warfare strategy from what we have today and look forward to the future to something being more disruptive that will shut a lot of this opportunity for cyber attacks, shut it down?
Mhm.
Well, I think everybody talks about artificial intelligence, right? So I think a lot of people are putting, all their eggs in that basket. And I get it. I understand it, right? We're not sure what artificial intelligence is going to do for us. We think it's a disruptor. In many ways, it is a disruptor, but is it disruptor for bad or is it disruptor for good? And I think the jury's still out a little bit on that. We've seen it perhaps from both sides. So, our ransomware people, our hackers, they're going to use AI to make their programs, their social engineering better. We in the cybersecurity world ought to be using AI to make our ability to ethically penetrate and ensure that our cyber defenses are, as good as they could be. We need to be doing that regularly. But man, you're going to get tired of me saying this, but you got to understand the human behavior. So I was at a high school this morning, spent a number of hours. Classes would come in. We talked to them about everything we do here at the university and cybersecurity and artificial intelligence, et cetera. And I had a young man ask me toward the end, he said, do you think that AI is going to provide you new jobs or take away jobs? It's like, well, that's a pretty insightful question for probably a 16-year-old. And I said, I don't know. But what I want you to know is that you can be prepared if you choose to be prepared. There are some jobs that, yes, AI is going to take away. We talked about, one of my colleagues talked about, I think it was Amazon Prime or somebody, they've got autonomous vehicles or vans that can come up to drive the highways and come up to your house. Then they're going to have little robots deliver the packages to your front door. They don't need a human being.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that might be a job that might go away, and artificial intelligence might help solve it. On the other hand, artificial intelligence could very easily help you build these systems and understand what's going on, and to be a better cybersecurity defender in your own organization. But you got to be willing to invest in it and to be willing to take the time to learn it and understand. You don't have to be able to program it, you don't have to be able to engineer it, but you got to be able to understand how to use it. And I think that that's important. In artificial intelligence itself, here's human behavior for you, right? Here's why it ought to scare you. Artificial intelligence is based on large language models, right? That's how they develop artificial intelligence. And the more data that they have, the better it gets. And we've seen that just with ChatGPT. We understand it started off, I don't know if it's literally 1.0, but now it's like 4.0, and if you pay for it. All right. My understanding, and I looked this up, so I'll take it for its word. My understanding is that the early versions of ChatGPT were based on the emails from Enron. You remember Enron? The one that. So all those interactions over the years, because it was part of the court case and became public documents, the people who developed AI took that information to help formulate how artificial intelligence interacts with you and me, because that was understanding behavior.
All right.
Now, it's gotten much better. I'm sure that that was just a small thing, and the more data they have. But what I'm saying is, it was our behavior as individuals and how we communicated that actually affected how early AI for ChatGPT was developed, right? So you talk about where we're going with it, what our concerns are from all those different perspectives you laid out. Is like we have to understand how we're using AI and ensuring and talking to our employees and ensuring them that, you know what, you're going to have a job. And if by chance you get eliminated, we're going to help you find a job within here or train you on something new, because that's what's scary and that's what's bothering individuals, our workers, and they want to know. And so I think that's, for me, is a big potential disruptor for good or bad. It depends on how we use it. And a lot of that's understanding, as we said, behavior.
Thank you very much for that answer. Hey, folks, this is Mike Mosquito and Maureen Eileen. The Buzz is here with Dr. Christopher Freeze from OU. He's talking to us about his past history as an FBI agent and now in academia, how he's educating us on cybersecurity and what we need to do to change our behaviors and how do we combat these cyber attacks and what cyber warfare should look like. We're back with Dr. Christopher Freeze. Maureen, you had a question for Dr. Freeze?
Yeah, so I'm fascinated, of course, as we all are, by AI, and I secretly hope that the Terminator is not a future prediction, although I'm still a little bit nervous. So let's step back from the future and let my heart slow down just a little bit. Let's talk about something from the recent past. I want to talk about the Change Healthcare attack. So this has been a huge disruption for our healthcare ecosystem. This group managed to shut down claims processing of about $1 billion a day. $1 billion. That's not pocket change to anyone. And that has left healthcare providers really scrambling to figure out how they're going to continue to stay afloat. And I saw a post on LinkedIn shortly after this attack had happened, and it was an independent provider, and they shared their story of how they were going to have to get a second mortgage for their home in order to keep the lights on. So I don't think that, even in the conversation that we've had, we speak very passionately about these are people, these are patients that are being affected. Well, these are providers. It's everybody. There's no escaping it. And just when I thought my worst fears might be laid to rest, Dr. Freeze last night sends me another article that indicates that Change could be getting extorted a second time from a different ransomware group, which I just have to share. I learned something new, a phrase called ransomware as a service. So yeah. I'm from IT. I know software as a service, but ransomware as a service, mind blown. Anyway, I want to go back and I want to get your perspective, because I think when I read the articles or Mike reads the articles, we've got our lenses on from our past perspectives, but you've really got a unique perspective with the different agencies that you've been a part of. So what are you seeing here that I'm not seeing, but I need to be knowing? And how does that translate to how we can better be prepared as organizations to stop this?
Yeah, man, ransomware is a service. Who knew? So it still kind of befuddles me a little bit, the fact that we're still dealing with certain issues, as I said, 30 years later, right? We still got the malware, we still got the phishing, still got the social engineering. I get all that. But in some ways, as we talked about earlier, the threat has evolved, and ransomware has, thrown a big kink into it. And so this idea that there are organizations such as the group, and I don't know if I should say allegedly or not, in the sense that I'm not sure what's been proved in court, but allegedly these groups, or some group that says, look, I'm going to compile all the hacking tools that you need. I'm going to do the work for you to be able to actually encrypt an organization's information. And I'm in essence going to sell it to you so that you can go out and do the bad deed. All I'm going to ask is maybe 10, 15% of whatever you take, right? So I'm selling my ransomware tools as a service to another hacking group so that they can go out and extort companies.
Wow.
If that doesn't, as you said, Maureen, blow your mind and get you to think better about the cybersecurity threat and the challenge, I don't know what would. This isn't organized. This is not just me with a hoodie on sitting in the basement of my parents' house in front of the keyboard, right? This is a sophisticated, organized criminal gang, multiple gangs who have taken this far beyond what probably anybody could imagine. So I think one of the first things you got to do is that the criminal threat from that standpoint continues to evolve. And it's going to evolve in the healthcare industry. There was a bank robber back in the 30s and 40s. His name was Willie Sutton. I don't know if you ever heard his name before, but Willie Sutton got fame because he allegedly said, when asked the question, Willie, why do you rob banks? He said, well, because that's where the money is. It makes sense, right? Well, he didn't actually say that, but he did say that I did it because I love it. I've never felt more alive than when I was inside robbing a bank. And I think that we have to understand that individuals, particularly in the healthcare field, have got to face the idea that they are the banks of today. You just said $1 billion daily. And I have the ability to disrupt that, to tell you can't make that money. All I got to do is encrypt your data. That's where the money is. And those guys I say guys, it could be gals, doesn't matter. The people who are doing that, they're doing it because that's where the money is and they love what they do. And so I think you've got to be able to recognize this threat. You got to understand that you are the money bags. You're where the funds are, and you're vulnerable, and you're going to pay. And most times, even though the FBI would say, hey, don't pay, you're going to pay because it's just business. And third, I think if you're going to have any chance of stopping it, you got to make sure you have a good incident response plan. And I don't mean just you've got 50 or 100 or 500 pages written out. You got a plan that when it hits the fan, you know what to do. And everybody knows what to do. Right. And maybe, just maybe, this crazy idea that once or twice a year, you actually practice that plan. Exactly. Right? So that you actually can get some training in it. And maybe when something does happen, you're perhaps less likely to have long-lasting effects because you got on top of it sooner. And everybody, and if nothing else, people change, you get promoted, people leave the organization. If you're talking about law enforcement, they move on, right? So if you're not keeping that plan up to date, that's your first problem. But if you're not exercising that plan, you might as well not even have a plan.
That is so insightful. It's not a tabletop exercise. These are real life drills that we need to be going and doing, practicing what we preach.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, it ought to be as involved as you can make it, right? Just don't sit around the table and talk through it. There's some value. I will say there's some value, but the best value is I'm actually holding a drill. Mm-hmm. People have to go somewhere. People have to do something different. People have to engage others in a way they haven't before. That's where you see the best benefit.
Yeah.
I agree. Engage, do something different, change behaviors. So, Dr. Freeze, before we wrap up, we have a bonus question for you. So, reflecting on your wealth of knowledge, experience, understanding, can you share another story? Again, this is the TMZ-esque healthcare podcast here, right? So we want we want folks to come here and tell us their stories first. We want them to hear it here. So give us another captivating story about cybersecurity and an incident that left an impact on you. And I want this one to be borderline, I couldn't talk about it when I wore a badge. So let's give our readers a little something to go, oh, they did something for me today.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice if I could talk about things that, I could. Look, this is probably not the answer you're going to want to hear. And I'm going to tell it to you anyway, right? Because all these hacks, all these cybersecurity issues, I don't know if I say they're a dime a dozen, but every time you pick the paper up, nobody picks the paper up except me. Every time you go on the web and you read something, right? There's computer hacks, there's issues, there's problems. You'd like to think that over the last 30 years, we've actually learned something, but I'm not sure we have. And so I'm going to leave you with it. I'm going to leave you with an example that I'm still talking about. And it's a small, the incident itself was pretty small and there was no big ramifications, but it had a huge impact. And I think it has an impact for us on society. And you start thinking about all the players that are involved and the different perspectives. And you tell me what I think when I get done. And if it's not, I'll think of something else, right? So early in my career, so we're talking, late 90s, I'm working in the state of Virginia. And one of my first cases, it came to us, and we knew that it probably came from somewhere outside of a small town, small area around Fredericksburg, Virginia. And so we started delving into it and come to find out that this young man, 16 years old, an only child,
Mm.
had lived most of his life in the Washington, D.C. area. And his dad was a police officer, right? So we got law enforcement, we got good parents, parents with some means, some money. They decide we're going to retire and we're going to move to this little place outside of Fredericksburg and we're going to live in a gated community. Why? Because I've been in DC and I see all this crime and I'm worried about it. Don't get my son involved. Great, got it. Mm-hmm. Problem is, he moved, as I said, to this little gated community and he didn't have any friends. He lived 30, 40 minutes away from the city, so he couldn't really go there, didn't have a car, didn't have access, But what he had was what every kid has today, but they didn't have then. What he had was a computer. I like it. Everybody's got a computer. They just call it a cell phone. But he had a computer. And he would come home every day from 4 o'clock to about 10, 11 o'clock. He'd work on the computer. His parents loved it, right? This is great. My son's learning all about computers. He's going to be a computer science guy. It's fantastic. And they didn't have a clue what he was doing. Well, what he was doing was he was out there creating his persona, first of all, 16 years old. And hey, man, I'm James Bond. I got all the pretty girls and all the fast cars, and I got all the money I need. I'm just, he was bad mouthing, talking smack about the government, just everybody, FBI included, right? And then somebody said, what's really cool is you need to be a hacker. You need to do some hacking because that's what's vogue these days. You need to do some hacking. And so he did. He got some tools, just like they do today, got some tools, and he hacked into a community college out on the West Coast. And he shut it down.
Oh.
He didn't do it very well because this wouldn't be an FBI story if and he didn't cover his IP address very well, so we were able to track it back. And we do the FBI, right? 6 o'clock in the morning, badges, 20, 30 guys, agents out there. And he'd gone to school. So we spent the time that morning actually doing a search warrant and finding what we needed to do in order to be able to make that case. We didn't know who it was at first. Could have been the dad. Could have been the mom. Probably not, but could have been. We didn't know it. And we found out it was a son. He's a juvenile in the federal system. Juveniles generally, unless it's a very violent crime, often don't face severe penalties. Mm-hmm. I think he maybe got some community service. And that was good. And I didn't keep up with him. I don't know what happened. I like to think positive things, but here's the lesson I took away. And here's a lesson that even today, as I talk to anybody else, I'm still using because it made such a big difference. And that is that individuals do things, often bad things, because they crave attention. Now you think about that. When you think about all of our kids who are out there on their cell phones, who don't have a social network, who don't have the friends that we might say we did growing up, don't have that mechanism, mm-hmm. and they're being instructed and influenced by others to do things, and all they want is attention. They don't necessarily want to get caught by the FBI or law enforcement, but they want things to go well. They want to be recognized and told that they're good and people like them and they're important and that you're clicking and you're following me, right? And you're doing all these things. And then if it makes a tipping point, the tipping point is maybe I can do something really iconic. I'll do something really big. I'll shut down a community college. I'll shut down a power grid. I'll shut down a bank. I'll do some ransomware. I'll extort somebody because that's the cool thing to do. Oof. We're not addressing these issues right now. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I hate to think what the future is going to be. We talk about ethical AI. There's not going to be an ethical AI discussion because we're not going to have the ethics that we need in order to govern it. And so this lesson for me, 20 some odd years ago, it's not a national security. It's not some great thing. It's not some secret stuff I could tell you or couldn't tell you about. It's about a young man with his computer and a lack of attention and why he engaged in cybersecurity threats and bad actions that may affect the rest of his life and certainly could affect others. And so that's my story that I think is important, and I wanted to share it with you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Freeze. I really enjoyed having you on with Maureen and I today, and I think that your insight and your guidance around what a future should and could look like will hopefully help others out there that are thinking about how do we not become the next Change Health, and how do we protect our people, our processes, our infrastructure, and the patients that are downstream from this infrastructure that's in place. All right. Well, thank you, Buzz listeners. Thank you for joining us today. That's a wrap for today's episode on the Buzz podcast. A big thank you to Dr. Christopher Freeze and my co-host Maureen Nylene. We'll pause, gonna roll that back because that was the alarm clock going off.
You're on time.
All right. That's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you, Dr. Freeze, for joining us on the Buzz podcast. A big thank you to you joining us and showing us your insight. It's invaluable. And that dynamic world of cybersecurity is growing ever more important to us each and every day. A big thank you to my co-host, Maureen. And until next time, stay vigilant, stay safe, stay informed, stay secure.
Stay buzzing.
That's what I want to hear. Stay buzzing. Have a great day. Thank you.